Welcome to your deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're tackling a really unsettling story from American history, Ted Bundy.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that just sticks with you, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think what you've probably found digging into the sources is this massive disconnect, between the horrific crimes and this almost normal, even charming guy he seemed to be.
That's the absolute core of it. How did he do it? How could someone capable of such brutality manage to fool so many people for such a long time?
Exactly. So our mission here, looking at all the material we've gathered, is to really unpack the key parts of his life, his crimes, and focus specifically on how he managed that deception, what were the mechanics behind it.
Right. Let's get into it. So where do we start? The beginning, I suppose.
Okay, yeah, let's start right at the beginning. He was born Theodore Robert Cowell, November 24th, 1946, Burlington, Vermont, at a home for unwed mothers.
And right there, from day one, you have deception built in because of the stigma back then, the 1940s. Single motherhood was just not accepted in the same way.
No, not at all.
So he was raised believing his actual mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was his older sister.
And his grandparents were his parents.
Precisely. And while you can maybe understand the family's reasons, given the times, it sets this pattern, doesn't it? A life starting with a fundamentally constructed reality.
It really makes you wonder how that shaped his view of truth, of identity.
Absolutely. And even really young, there were, unsettling signs popping up in the sources.
Yeah, stories from neighbors, things like that.
Exactly. People described him as shy, intelligent, sure, but also isolated. And there were disturbing stories like that really creepy incident with his aunt when he's just a little kid.
The one with the knives. Yeah, that one always stands out.
He supposedly surrounded his sleeping aunt with knives from the kitchen. Just stood there watching her. Blank expression, apparently. Chilling. Hints at something dark way beneath the surface.
Definitely unsettling. Okay, so then when he was about 4, his mother marries Johnny Bundy.
Right, and they move out to Tacoma, Washington.
And he's formally adopted, gets the name Ted Bundy. But that relationship with his stepfather, it sounds like it wasn't smooth sailing based on the materials.
But it seemed like it. Reports suggest Ted never really clicked with Johnny Bundy, never really accepted him.
Felt superior, maybe.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of that reported. This feeling of being sort of above his stepfather, maybe even the whole family situation. It could be a piece of the puzzle, that early sense of superiority fueling his later manipulations.
So moving into adolescence, early adulthood, this feeling seems to get stronger, maybe manifests in worse ways.
Looks like it. Sources point to him becoming more withdrawn, struggling socially.
Right.
And then you see the start of behaviors like shoplifting, being a peeping Tom.
But outwardly, he kept up appearances. High school seemed pretty normal.
Yeah, that's the disturbing contrast, isn't it? Outwardly, he's skiing, dating, involved in church. But inwardly, this whole fantasy life centered on control and, transgression is developing.
He was already good at compartmentalizing then.
Extremely good. And this fascination with the darker side of things carries into college. He starts studying psychology, ironically enough.
Yeah, the irony is just, wow. University of Puget Sound, then University of Washington, studying the criminal mind, no less.
And working at a suicide crisis hotline. Think about that.
Unbelievable.
Offering help, seeming empathetic. Well, secretly, these dark thoughts are churning. It's the perfect example of his duplicity.
And wasn't he acquainted with Anne Rule, the crime writer, around this?
Yes. And she wrote about it later, didn't she? How she saw him as kind, empathetic, intelligent.
Right. She worked alongside him at the crisis center. She had no idea.
It just hammers home how convincing that mask was.
Makes you really question things. Then there was that first serious relationship. A lot of sources highlight that one.
With a young woman from a wealthy background. And notably, She apparently resembled his later victim's long dark hair, parted in the middle.
And the breakup hit him hard.
Devastatingly,
Yeah.
by all accounts. Some theories, and you see this in a few sources, suggest that rejection might have sort of focused his existing dark tendencies, channeled all that anger and resentment.
An analyst, maybe, for something that was already there.
Possibly. It's hard to say for sure, but the timing is suggestive.
So by the early 70s, he's trying law school, he's involved in politics.
Yeah, volunteering for the Washington State Republican Party, going to fundraisers, projecting this image of a bright, ambitious young man.
The perfect cover.
Absolute perfect cover for planning abductions in secret. It shows how easily society's expectations, a good resume, can blind people.
This mask of normalcy he perfected in the 70s. It's just so central to understanding how he got away with things for so long, right? The clean-cut look, polite manner.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't accidental. It was meticulously crafted. And his psychology background, he used that.
How so?
He literally studied how to mimic empathy, how to read social cues, how to blend in. He knew how to appear non-threatening, even helpful.
And the political work just added another layer of respectability. It's mind-boggling now.
It really is. He weaponized trust. And then there's his relationship with Elizabeth Klopfer, Liz.
Right. That seemed outwardly normal, too, for the most part.
On the surface, yeah. Loving, attentive even. But underneath, sources mention control issues, these unexplained disappearances.
But nothing raised major red flags for her at the time.
Apparently not enough, which shows how insidious manipulation can be, even with people who are close to you. They get drawn into the web.
So while he's living this seemingly normal life, politically active in a relationship, he's also secretly doing what? Researching?
Yes. Deep dives into crime. Frequent trips to libraries, poring over true crime archives, studying other killers, missing persons cases, taking notes.
He was literally studying how to be a better killer.
It looks that way. Not just a casual interest. It was methodical, dedicated learning for a horrific purpose.
And this highlights his adaptability, doesn't it? Presenting totally different faces to different people.
Totally. A shapeshifter. The vulnerable act for potential victims, polite employee, cooperative front for police. Lies were the foundation of every interaction. He exploited people's assumptions.
And even practiced manipulating people in small ways, like shoplifting or the fake injury thing.
Those are like rehearsals, testing grounds, the fake cast, the arm sling, asking women for help carrying books or loading something into his car.
Using their decency against them.
Exactly. He learned how to weaponize kindness.
But despite this, his actual ambitions, like law school, they kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, he got accepted to law school in Utah, among others, but he struggled, couldn't keep up, dropped out. It seems like the dark fantasies just completely took over.
And then 1974 happens. Things shift dramatically.
Big time. Suddenly, young women in the Pacific Northwest start disappearing. Mostly college students, young, brunette, attractive.
Vanishing in broad daylight. From campuses, parks, places you'd think were safe.
And often with no sign of a struggle, which points to his planning, his ability to gain trust instantly. This wasn't random violence. It was calculated, a terrifying pattern emerging.
And all the while, he's the friendly neighbor, the guy smiling at you in the store, maybe even showing up at vigils for the missing women.
The audacity is just staggering, maintaining that double life with such precision.
His method got refined, colder, more controlled, using trust as the main weapon.
Right. Not impulsive rage, but cold, calculated predation, leaving clean scenes initially.
The first known victim usually cited in this wave is Linda Ann Healy, January 74, University of Washington student.
Vanished from her basement apartment bedroom. The only signs were what? A blood stain on the pillowcase. No forced entry. Utterly terrifying.
And that was just the start of a horrifying string in 74. Donna Gale Manson in March.
Susan Rancourt in April. Roberta Parks in May. Brenda Ball in June. All college students. All just gone. The fear in that region must have been immense.
And the few witness accounts started pointing to his tactics, right? The fake cast, the sling.
Asking for help with his VW Beetle. The boyish charm, feigned vulnerability.
And the name Ted started surfacing.
Witnesses mentioned a guy named Ted, often with an injury, driving that Beetle. The first real clues, but fragmented. Not enough to pin him down yet.
Then came Lake Sammamish State Park, July 14th, 1974. That felt like a major escalation.
Unbelievably brazen. Approaching multiple women in broad daylight at a crowded park with the injured sailor story or asking for help with a boat.
Leading to the disappearance of Janice Ott and then Denise Naslund, just hours apart.
The confidence, or maybe compulsion, to try the same trick repeatedly in the same place on the same day. It's chilling. That's what really solidified the witness accounts.
More details came out. The composite sketch got better. The name Ted linked more strongly.
Yeah, things were starting to point vaguely in his direction.
But his charm, his clean-cut image, no criminal record to speak of, it still protected him, didn't it?
It really did. People just couldn't reconcile the charming, helpful Ted with the monster described in witness reports. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the violence was escalating. Reports of him revisiting grave sites, the gruesome discovery of some remains, decapitated.
Just horrific. And then, August 74, he makes a move.
Yep. Packs up and heads to Salt Lake City, Utah, enrolls in law school there.
A fresh start and a fresh hunting ground.
Exactly. The killings in Washington stop abruptly. But then, the cycle begins again in Utah. Same terrifying pattern, new location.
So now he's operating across state lines, which must have complicated things for law enforcement back then.
Hugely. This is before widespread data sharing, before the FBI's behavioral analysis unit was really formalized in the way we know it now. They weren't connecting the dots across states yet.
He was moving like a ghost.
Changing names sometimes, adjusting tactics slightly, but the core compulsion, that predatory drive, was constant.
And the Utah disappearances mirrored the PNW ones, using the same kinds of ruses.
Very similar MO, yes. The help me approach, feigning injury or authority. But then came a crucial moment. The Carol DeRange incident.
Ah, yes, the survivor. That was huge.
Absolutely pivotal. She got suspicious when he claimed to be a police officer but didn't seem quite right. She fought back, escaped from his car. Her testimony was invaluable.
Provided a first-hand account, a description, details of his methods in Utah.
And crucially, it led to a connection. A small detail from her case linked to another disappearance, Debra Kent.
So the police in Utah started thinking, okay, we likely have a serial offender here.
Exactly. The pattern was solidifying in Utah now, too.
And then finally a break, August 1975, the traffic stop.
That was the beginning of the end for that phase. Pulled over by highway patrol, suspicious items found in his car, handcuffs, mask, crowbar, things like that.
Which led to surveillance.
And eventually Carol DeRange identifying him in a lineup.
Leading to his arrest for her kidnapping.
Yep. Finally, a concrete charge.
And in March 76, he's convicted in Utah for that kidnapping. Sentenced. Must have seemed like it was over.
You'd think so. Justice served. Case closed on that front. But Bundy wasn't done.
No. The escapes in Colorado, just incredible audacity.
First, during a court hearing in Aspen, he was acting as his own lawyer, asked to use the law library.
Yeah.
And just jumped out a second-story window.
Unbelievable. He was caught after a few days, though.
Right. But then later that year, a more elaborate escape from jail in Glenwood Springs, sawed through the ceiling of his cell, crawled through the crawl space.
And was gone, this time for longer.
Much longer. He made his way across the country, ending up in Florida.
And that's where things got even more brutal, if that's possible. Early 1978.
Yeah, the attack of the Chomega sorority house at Florida State University in Tallahassee, just savage.
Multiple women attacked in their sleep, 2 killed, others severely injured.
Horrific. And then just a few weeks later, the abduction and murder of a 12-year-old girl, Kimberly Leach, from her school.
The violence seemed completely unhinged by that point.
It really did. Less controlled, perhaps more frenzied.
But his run finally ended soon after that, February 15th, 1978.
Pulled over again, this time in Pensacola, driving a stolen car. Tried to give a fake name, but the officer was suspicious.
And the fingerprints confirmed it. It was Ted Bundy. Finally.
The cross-country nightmare was over. But the legal spectacle was just beginning.
The trial of the century, they called it. The media coverage was insane.
Absolutely unprecedented for a serial killer trial.
Yeah.
Broadcast television coverage. Bundy's face was everywhere.
He faced charges for the Chi Omega attacks for Kimberly Leach's murder.
And the prosecution knew they were dealing with someone incredibly manipulative. They had to be careful.
And then Bundy drops another bombshell. He decides to represent himself again.
Yeah, partly. He had lawyers, but insisted on playing a major role, cross-examining witnesses himself, driven by that need for control, for the spotlight.
It turned the courtroom into this bizarre theater, didn't it? Bundy, the accused murderer, questioning witnesses, making objections, maintaining this eerie calm.
Charming reporters, during breaks even. The public was just morbidly fascinated by the contradiction. The handsome, educated man accused of such monstrous acts.
But behind the performance, his legal skills weren't really up to par, were they?
Not really. He knew some law, but his arguments were often disorganized. He couldn't effectively counter the evidence.
And the evidence was strong. Eyewitnesses from Chi Omega.
Forensic evidence. And crucially, the bite mark evidence.
That was groundbreaking at the time, linking his teeth to marks on one of the victims.
Hugely significant. He tried hard to discredit it, but it was powerful physical evidence connecting him directly to the crime scene.
And his behavior during the trial got more erratic too, right? Firing lawyers, arguing with the judge.
Yeah, the mask was slipping under pressure. He was losing control.
And then that absolutely surreal moment during the penalty phase. The marriage proposal.
To Carol Ann Boone, who had been supporting him in open court.
Yeah.
Using some obscure Florida law to make it legally binding right then and there.
Just what was that about?
Who knows for sure? A distraction. A final power play. A desperate attempt to look human. It was bizarre, whatever the motive.
Didn't sway the jury, though. July 24th, 1979, guilty. All counts for the Chi Omega murders.
And later, another trial. Another guilty verdict and death sentence for Kimberly Leach's murder.
So finally confined. Death row, Florida State Prison. But still manipulating.
Oh, yeah. Interviews, letters, endless appeals. He played the system for nearly a decade, delaying the inevitable, staying in the spotlight.
He remained this object of fascination, didn't he? True crime books, documentaries starting even then, psychologists studying him.
He became this sort of dark cultural figure, a symbol of hidden evil.
And what did the psychologists and profilers conclude? What was going on in his head?
Well, the consensus points strongly towards severe antisocial personality disorder. Maybe narcissistic personality disorder, too.
Key traits being?
Pathological lying, manipulation, zero remorse, zero empathy, inflated sense of self-worth. But the chilling part with Bundy was how well he combined that with superficial charm and intelligence.
He could mimic normal human emotions when needed.
Exactly. That contrast, studying psychology but using it to deceive, the polite exterior hiding the monster within, that's the enduring puzzle.
And his own explanations. They were always evasive, weren't they?
Very. Often spoke in the third person, like the entity did it. Later, he tried blaming pornography, which experts widely dismissed as another manipulation.
Just refusing to take responsibility.
Completely. And that's another unsettling thing. There's no single clear why. No definitive childhood trauma that neatly explains everything.
Which makes it scarier somehow. Evil without an easy origin story.
It challenges our need for simple explanations. Sometimes, maybe there isn't one.
But that need for control seemed constant. Over victims, the media, the trial.
Absolutely fundamental to his psychology, right to the very end.
And we have to mention the whole phenomenon of women who were drawn to him even after he was convicted, hybristophilia.
Yes, the so-called killer groupies. Bundy was an extreme example. It's a disturbing aspect, and it's so important not to let that fascination overshadow the victims.
Definitely. The focus has to remain on them. Did the final psych evaluations offer anything new?
They basically confirmed he knew exactly what he was doing. He understood right from wrong. He just consistently chose wrong, willfully.
And even in final interviews, any hint of genuine remorse?
He might have used the words, spoken about regret, but most observers felt it lacked any real depth or sincerity. More performance.
Just maintaining the facade. So after all the appeals ran out, January 24th, 1989.
His execution date arrived. He gave some final interviews, still trying to shape the narrative.
And then at Florida State Prison, it was over.
Execution by electric chair, 7:20 a.m. The end of Ted Bundy's life.
But not the end of the story or the questions, really.
Not at all. So many questions linger. How many victims were there, really? We still don't know the true number.
What signs were missed along the way? Could he have been stopped sooner?
And the big one. How do we protect ourselves from people like him? People who wear that mask of normalcy so convincingly.
These are the tough questions his case leaves us with, and the impact on the families of the women he killed. Unimaginable. A void that never closes.
Their lives were shattered forever. His execution brought some sense of justice for some, but it couldn't bring back their daughters, their sisters, their friends.
Bundy's case also had a huge impact beyond the families, didn't it? On society, on law enforcement.
Definitely. He's often called the first media-age serial killer because his trial was broadcast. It brought this type of crime into living rooms in a way that hadn't happened before.
And it pushed law enforcement to evolve, right? At the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit.
Their development was significantly spurred by cases like Bundy's, learning from the mistakes, the misconnections across state lines, the need for psychological profiling.
And you have to wonder, with today's technology, DNA, databases.
Oh, almost certainly he'd have been caught much, much sooner today. DNA evidence alone likely would have linked him far earlier.
But that cultural legacy, the endless fascination, books, movies, documentaries, there's a danger there too, isn't there?
There absolutely is. The risk of sensationalizing the killer, making him this dark anti-hero, and losing sight of the real people whose lives he destroyed.
It's so vital we remember them. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, Jorgen Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Naslund,
Deborah Kent, Karen Campbell, Julie Cunningham, Denise Oliverson, Lynette Culver, Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and likely others we don't even know about.
Their names, their stories, their potential, that's what needs remembering.
They were individuals, not just names on a list associated with him.
Bundy ultimately serves as this chilling case study, doesn't he? A reminder that evil doesn't always look evil. It can look normal, charming, helpful even.
It's a disturbing truth. Danger can be hidden right in plain sight. We need to be aware of that potential without becoming paranoid, but aware.
His shadow definitely lingers. It forces us to remember the victims and to keep trying to understand how these things happen and how we might prevent them.
Yeah.
So thinking about everything we've discussed, everything in the sources, what's a final thought to leave our listeners with?
Well, given how central Bundy's manipulation was, how he exploited trust, maybe the question to ponder is this: how do we cultivate a necessary, healthy skepticism about people's outward appearances or claims, especially those who seem charming or authoritative, without becoming totally cynical or fearful?
That's a tough balance.
It really is. How do we stay aware of potential danger, like the kind Bundy represented, while still engaging with the world in an open and trusting way? Bundy's story makes that question feel pretty urgent, I think.